So, apparently 2017 was a really bad year. News to me, I was playing video games the whole time. What the fuck happened? I'm gonna go back to isolating myself from society. You all are crazy. So 2017 happened. One could focus on someone getting the brilliant idea to make a film about emojis, a song repeating the words Gucci Gang a billion times getting popular, and the entire internet being threatened by some FCC douchebag. But hey, a lot of good games came out last year, so that almost makes up for the existence of 50 Shades Darker. Almost. I don't usually do these best games of the year type videos, but I'm making an exception for 2017 since it was pretty strong for new releases. Also, for once, I actually played a substantial amount of new releases during the actual year they came out, so I wasn't going to be one to pass up such a chance. So yeah, top 10 favorite games of 2017. Keep in mind that there's plenty of games this year that I haven't gotten to play but would absolutely love to, so if you don't see a favorite of yours on here, feel free to give a recommendation. There's been a plentiful amount of titles, so I imagine everyone's favorites will be different. Nothing will ever beat Life of Black Tiger though, consider that number 0. Crash Bandicoot returned. That's cool, I guess. I was conflicted on whether or not to even include the Insane Trilogy here, since it's really just an HD remake of 3 games I've already played when you get down to it. Eventually I caved due to a game later on this list also being a remake, and because, god damn it, I just had way too much fun with the Insane Trilogy to not at least give it a mention. I gotta commend Vicarious Visions for how fantastic a job they did recreating all 3 games. All aspects from the smooth controls to even the most minor of graphical details from the original games are captured beautifully. The original feel of the PS1 games is kept intact here, though given a few alterations that result in this version of the trilogy having an identity of its own. The games are all largely the same as they were on the PS1, though with some pretty welcome improvements, notably with the first game actually getting a proper save system and the more clunky minigames than Warped being polished up a bit. Along with that, I really enjoyed the extra content they added, like originally cut levels, time trial being added to the first 2 games, as well as letting Coco be a playable character, even if it is just cosmetic. Oh, and those graphics, man, that's really what this is all about. The original PS1 games still look phenomenal even today, and I'm happy to say that the graphics translated beautifully to the modern version. I put this only at number 10 since it's mostly just a graphical enhancement at the end of the day, and I feel like a few aspects compared to the PS1 games are a bit awkward or missed opportunities for improvement, but it's overall a fantastic love letter to fans and the perfect place for newcomers to jump in. Now that Vicarious Visions proves they can do Crash Bandicoot right, I'd like to see them do their own original Crash game. Give Crash his own Sonic Mania, if you will. Oh, and maybe a Spyro remaster if that isn't too much trouble. I mean, if Bubsy got a game this year, literally anybody else should get one too. I remember my initial impressions about Horizon Zero Dawn upon first reveal was that the game looked interesting, but it was hard for me to truly be excited since nothing shown off really conveyed to me what the game was even supposed to be. In other words, the exact same mistake that Death Stranding is still making. As release rolled closer by, I did grow more intrigued by the game, eventually buying it day 1, and I'm happy I did. The aspect of Horizon that drew me in immediately was the captivating world. It's an interesting premise around a primitive tribal society that views advanced technology from generations past as a supernatural force. There's a lot to the game's world, from the various tribes you visit with their own customs and traditions, and the landscape being filled to the brim with history. Every place you go and every quest you do has something to reveal about the setting, and subsequently resulted in me exploring and doing all I could. I really like Aloy as a protagonist, showing determination and compassion to all those around her in spite of a rough upbringing. I also can't ignore how every inch of this game is vibrant, alive, and crisp with detail, shitty motion capture notwithstanding. Seriously, who approved young Aloy's design? She looks possessed by a demon. Get a priest to sort this shit out immediately. While I have my issues with Horizon's game design, like the garbage camera, slow start, and climbing feeling a bit too automated for my liking, it's way too much of a blast for those issues to bog the game down too much for me. The wide assortment of mechanical beasts are really cool and require different strategies and weapons to effectively take them down. Horizon many times pushes you to keep as varied an assortment of tools as you can to change up your attack depending on which enemy you're going after, which I feel keeps things exciting and fresh all throughout. I was especially surprised with how much mileage I got out of the game's photo mode. Playing around with camera angles, time of day, filters, and visual effects is so addicting, and I'd love for other games in the future to include such a feature now that sharing screenshots is a lot more convenient on all platforms. I wish the game didn't end on a sequel bait ending, considering I despise them, but hey, if Guerrilla Games can keep this level of quality up in future titles, I'd gladly take part in a sequel. I did have a bit of skepticism toward getting a Switch, especially after how rough a time Nintendo had with the Wii U and giving people a reason to own one. I imagine they realized this, with them continuing to port the Wii U titles actually worth a damn. Plus, you know, they launched the Switch with the killer app to kill all killer apps. In other words, all of what would happen with Microsoft if they weren't horrible at literally everything ever. I don't think I'll make anybody upset by saying The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is fucking incredible. Might turn a few heads with it at such a low spot though, so I'll go over why. This is mostly just personal bias, but I honestly prefer the smaller, more contained world design in 3D Zelda over Breath of the Wild's large, expansive world, mostly from the time it cuts down on traveling. Along with that, I feel with how much it strays away from the 3D Zelda norm, a few of the elements I typically love, like the main dungeons, are kinda underdeveloped. Also Rain. Rain is cancer. But enough about personal grievances, here's all the good shit now. I hear a lot about how many open world games give the player the freedom to do whatever they want, but I have yet to see another that literally gives you the option to face the final boss after you're done with the tutorial. The world in Breath of the Wild is huge, and exploring every inch of it is always fresh and exciting. Helps that all parts of the map can be explored anytime without restraints, so the adventure can be done in any order and manner that you desire. Regions, dungeons, shrines, basically everything can be tackled whenever. As much as the game's about exploration, it's also equally focused on survival skills. The world is a beautiful place, but everything in it wants you dead, just like in reality. The hostile creatures you encounter and even the terrain you traverse can easily mean a horrible end for you, and the only way to stay alive is through your own skill. There are things that'll help out, like upgrades to health or stamina, and strong weapons that still break after like 5 strikes because weapon durability is apparently a foreign concept to Hyrule, so no wonder Ganon whooped their asses. But in the end, your skill and ability to adapt to the harsh, changing landscape is most important to all. So yeah, while the game might not be entirely my thing, keyword entirely, I still love quite a bit about it, and I can easily see why it's Game of the Year for so many people. A great showcase for what such a small little tablet is capable of, and an outstanding Zelda game that opens the gate for more like it. My favorite Zelda is still Skyward Sword though. Everyone may give this game crap, but it's still special to me, goddammit. You know, sometimes I just want to find a bicycle, pick it up with my own bare hands, and beat up some douchebags trying to start shit. It's a perfectly natural human urge that anybody could feel. Don't judge me. I'm too well behaved to actually do that myself, so I'm thankful that games like Yakuza Zero exist so I can live out my violent fantasies in an environment where I won't potentially be incarcerated. And idiots claim that video games cause violent behavior. Ha! I hadn't played any Yakuza game before Zero, but one thing for sure is that I've really been missing out if the others are anywhere near this good. Honestly, the combat alone would be enough to sell this game for me. It's such a good balance between grounded realism and over-the-top, less realistic anime shit, along with being super satisfying to string impressive combos together and activating supers that basically destroy enemies so badly that you wonder how on earth they're even still alive. Oh, and being able to switch combat styles on the fly makes my DMC fanaticism boil to the surface. Combat's all well and good, but Yakuza 0 is also helped tremendously by the narrative, focusing on Kazuma Kiryu proving his innocence in the case of a framed murder, and Goro Majima protecting a target who has a hit placed on them for reasons unknown. It's a really intense and compelling story that continues to keep me on edge with what could happen next. With it being a prequel to the entire series, it's also the perfect place for people like me who hadn't yet gotten into Yakuza to jump in, as it's a pretty effective introduction to the world and characters. It may not have the highest quality textures or character models, but it very much makes up for this with the insane environmental detail. The areas you're placed in are small, but are packed to the brim with details that make even just running through them visually gorgeous. I personally haven't gotten into the side content like business management or the karaoke and arcade games, but they're a great addition that will most definitely have people go off the main story just to wind down and enjoy the 80s Japanese nightlife. I have yet to beat the game, though I can assure you I have the full intention of doing so with how much of a blast I've had from even just what I've played so far. And with Kiwami, a remake of the first game currently on PS4 in North America, with Kiwami 2 soon to follow, safe to say my time with Yakuza is far from done. Hey, remember last year when we all thought that Metroid was dead forever? That was a truly horrible time to be alive, which, oddly enough, is still a slightly better time to be alive than present day. Pretty understandable that everyone assumed the worst for the franchise, considering Federation Force was probably the most non-Metroid Metroid game possible, along with the whole AM2R takedown debacle. Not helping that the last Metroid game was 6 years ago with Other M, which, you know, sucked. And then Nintendo stole E3 2017 with one single image along with a new 3DS game, which I can safely say was fucking awesome. Having not played a 2D Metroid before, Samus Returns was a first for me, and with it taking the general atmosphere of the Prime trilogy and putting it on a 2D plane, I'd say it made for a pretty natural transition. The feelings of isolation and mystery exploring the mysterious unknown world are just as immersive as they've ever been. Making your way through all the various levels of SR388 constantly provides new memorable locales to navigate and dangerous obstacles to overcome. Even for someone like me who doesn't typically find Metroid games all that difficult, I was pleasantly surprised with the challenge that Samus Returns presented. Health upgrades are few and far between, so you've gotta make do with what little you have, along with taking advantage of the game's melee counter system to stun enemies for an easy kill and gain a bit more Aeon. Speaking of which, in addition to the typical Metroid abilities like Super Missiles, the Spider Ball, and Screw Attack, also known as a website people only go to for Death Battle, you've also got new Aeon abilities that are pretty useful, especially the one that helps display destructible blocks that probably would have otherwise been cryptic. While progression is basically tied to you killing the same 4 Metroids repeatedly, subtle differences to the arena do make the way you have to take them down different each time. There is some backtracking every so often, but notably less than what you typically find from Metroid, which might be more appealing to somebody who's not that big a fan of that aspect of the franchise. Ever since the inception of the 3DS, Metroid was always one of the series I wanted to have a game on the system, and even with the 5 to 6 year long wait for one, I'd say it was well worth it. I can only hope that Prime 4 will deliver as well. Oh, and apparently Samus Returns is a remake of Metroid 2 on Game Boy. That's cool, I guess. Breath of the Wild was a game I wanted to play when I got my hands on a Switch, but the game that actually made me go out and buy the system was Super Mario Odyssey. I do not by any means regret purchasing either because, oh boy! For the longest time, I had no idea how Nintendo would ever be able to make a truly exceptional follow-up to Super Mario Galaxy. I mean, Galaxy 2 was great and all, but it's kinda hard to get around the fact that it's mostly just more of the same. It's Mario in space. Where do you even go from there?
Well, apparently to a photorealistic city with 10-foot tall inhabitants. Only in Mario could such a location be unusual compared to outer space.
The Galaxy games at one point were my favorite games in the Mario series, but yeah, I think now I'm ready to give that title to Odyssey. Instead of having Galaxy's linear, straightforward style, Odyssey adapts the open, free-to-explore style of 64 and Sunshine, though without having a central overworld like Peach's Castle or Delfino Plaza. I'd say this works very well to Odyssey's benefit, as it keeps the game at a steady pace by letting you continue on in each level after collecting a Power Moon. Every stage in the game I found to be an absolute joy, with the majority being very expansive jungle gyms that allow for, and in fact, encourage impressive and out-of-the-box usage of the game's mechanics. Many tricks that might normally seem like exploits from game design oversights are actually very much intentional in Odyssey, often giving you an extra reward for figuring them out. Simultaneously, the levels act as a hub for a shitload of objectives and challenges that all give you Power Moons. Some objectives aren't as creative as others, and I kinda lost count of how many times just ground pounding or looking up in the sky gave me a Power Moon, but with the game having a total of like 900 of the damned things, I can forgive this. I can't help but adore each and every level theme in the game. There are a few reminiscent of typical Mario tropes like snow, beach, and water, but even those stand out as some of the more imaginative and well thought out renditions of such themes. Probably the biggest highlight for original level themes is New Donk City, but there's also the Tim Burton-esque Cap Kingdom, a level that's essentially Mario's take on Planet Wisp, and basically Dark Souls. Because apparently Nintendo predicted 2017 was the year every game would be compared to Dark Souls, I guess. Even after the main story, there's still a lot of in-game content, and I'm still working on getting all of the Power Moons. In short, Mario Odyssey is amazing, and for any Switch owner, it's an absolute must-have. Odyssey's fantastic and all, but in terms of hat-based platformers, I prefer a different, smaller title. This game is a hat in time, and it's pecking adorable. I apologize for the profanity. If you play this game, you'll probably know what I'm referring to. For someone like me who's beyond enthusiastic about old-school 3D collectathons, A Hat in Time retains all the elements that make such games appealing, cuts out all of the bullshit, and crafts a heartfelt love letter to the genre, along with making a truly excellent addition to it. It's not the longest game, but the limited amount of content on offer here is so varied and fun that length is basically a non-issue. Every level you go to is kept fresh by unique structure that has all of them played differently, yet still retain the game's non-linear nature. From the game letting you tackle timepieces in any order to opening up the levels for free roam, there's a lot done mechanically and visually to make every part of the game fun and memorable. It's made all the more enjoyable with the smooth, responsive control, and each stage being crafted with mechanics and all your hat abilities in mind. Every inch of each level is an absolute feast for the eyes with the gorgeous cel-shaded art style. The colors make everything vibrant, and the insane detail within environments make it so no part of the game feels like empty, wasted space. I was pleasantly surprised with how much A Hat in Time's writing made me smile and laugh. From Hat Kid's endearing childlike behavior to the countless sadistic quips to the comedic twist put on concepts usually presented more seriously, you can tell the people behind the game had a lot of fun writing it. It's a nice extra work of effort that makes this already exceptional 3D platformer all the more charming. If you'd like a more broad, less condensed version of my thoughts on the game, I've done a review you can check out if you'd like.
Honestly, I consider A Hat in Time to be the game for 3D platformers that something like, say, Shovel Knight is to 2D platformers. Taking familiar elements that work while simultaneously making its own game that helps raise the bar for future titles.
There are a few things I could nitpick about the game, but in the end, they really don't amount to anything that hurts my experience. Even then, the development team has been super helpful with addressing issues that people have, and I'm more than happy to see such a relationship between developer and player, especially this day and age. With even more content to come in the future that's free, might I add, there's more than enough reason to pick this game up. thought that runs through my mind is what will come of our world once us humans go extinct. According to Nier Automata, it'll be taken over by sexy android girls, boars, birds, and the almighty moose. Nice to know that we're in the good timeline. This game was a very pleasant surprise. I knew I was probably going to like it since it's developed by Platinum, who have yet to make a truly terrible game, at least without pawning shit off to their B team. Though with it being helmed by Yoko Taro, whose work I hadn't experienced beforehand, things got pretty weird. In a good way, since Nier Automata is not only one of the best games of the year, but one of the best I've ever played. With how much I've heard about Yoko Taro's past work being janky and unpolished when it came to gameplay, it's great to know Platinum managed to smooth out the gameplay side of things. While incorporating RPG elements, the game is mainly a fusion of hack-and-slash action and bullet hell, transitioning focus between both styles in a pretty natural manner. It's also nice how freely customizable your playstyle is, from your weapons to the control scheme to the upgrade chips you have installed, which can even allow you to remove the HUD display to include different enhancements. Some I do feel make you too overpowered, even on higher difficulty settings, but destroying dozens upon dozens of machines at once while refilling your health stupidly fast is admittedly pretty fun. The game is visually stunning. Going through the remains of a civilization from thousands of years ago is depressing, yet oddly majestic when seeing all those that made this land their home, only to have your heart ripped out and stomped to pieces with all the shit that goes down later on.
If you go into this game wanting to play a fun hack and slash while positioning the camera up to be skirt like the filthy degenerate you are, have no shame, I did so too, you'll get that. But also a little something extra.
The game's story is as emotionally gripping as it is depressing and fucking weird. It essentially revolves around machines left to do what they're designed and programmed to, while their creators have long since vanished. Also simultaneously developing human-like emotions like love, anger, sadness, and joy. Also having orgies, forming cults, and bringing new dudes into existence. Well, it's a wonderful narrative with a balance of uplifting and depressing events made all the greater with the dynamics between main protagonists 2B, 9S, and A2. I won't give any spoilers away since you should pick the game up if you haven't already. I guarantee it's an experience you'll never forget. Glory to mankind for allowing this masterpiece of a game to be real. Ever have that game you've barely heard of, maybe hear one guy on the internet talk about at length, yet that was enough to get you interested in the game in question? Well, this year, that was me with Holo Knight. Wasn't too sure what I was getting into with this game, aside from it being a Metroidvania, but all I can say is damn, am I glad I got into it. The first thing that immediately stuck out to me is the absolutely stunning art direction. Usually, I'm not the biggest fan of gray, nearly monochromatic art styles, but Holo Knight is one of the most visually captivating games I've ever played. Every area within the large, expansive setting of Hollow Nest is insanely detailed, unique, and feels truly alive, or dead. Even with the non-linear structure and multiple paths and routes to explore the world, I rarely, if ever, found myself getting lost since every part of the map is recognizable and easy to piece together. At its core, combat is pretty simplistic with the only mechanics being a simple slash and dodge, but it works well with how it's utilized. The enemy selection in Hollow Knight is vast and different fighting strategies are required to defeat pretty much all of them. It's a nice, clever way to add depth to the relatively minimalistic combat. In true Metroidvania fashion, there are a number of abilities and items throughout your journey that will expand and open the world up the more you have, subsequently making it all the more satisfying to breeze through segments that would have been harder or impossible to get through otherwise. Hollow Knight is kinda like Dark Souls, and I don't just mean that it's hard like every clickbait article does. It's a difficult game for sure, and it's handed me my ass on a silver platter multiple times, but I'm more referring to how the game is structured mechanically and narratively. Dying causes you to lose all the currency you have on yourself, and the only way to retrieve it is going back to where you originally died, which is pretty intense considering the treacherous environment you have to navigate. Often for me, it resulted in some pretty loud moments of salt when I obtained thousands in currency and lost it all from playing like an idiot. Like the Soulsborne games, there's not a direct, traditional plot, but it's conveyed to you through environmental storytelling and various texts. It won't be to everyone's taste, but I think it's an interesting way to give background on what this bleak, depressing world used to be like and how it ended up in its current state. In terms of the Metroidvanias and indie titles I've experienced, Holo Knight is easily one of my absolute favorites. It only got beaten out by one other game this year.
Man, it feels so good that we finally made it to winter 2014. Thought that time would never come.
Persona 5 is my game of the year. Imagine my shock. It takes a lot to get me legitimately excited for a video game, considering how I try and avoid hype in fear of being horribly let down. Persona 5 was a case where I couldn't help myself, and thankfully the game delivered everything I could have wanted, and then some. The Persona games before were pretty stylish, but 5 takes style to a whole different continent. Every shot of this game, from 2D cutscenes to 3D cutscenes to standard gameplay, is stunning and aesthetically looks like an upgraded version of Catherine that took some inspiration from The World Ends With You. Even the HUD and battle menus are cool and flashy, and can't bring up Persona without going over the story, since it's kind of an important little detail about these games. Focusing on a group of rebellious youths, the plot of Persona 5 is about them working to get back at people who've abused their positions of power to screw them over. A wide assortment of themes were tackled, like exposing the corruption of those higher in society, bringing up discussion about the difference between delivering proper justice and causing mindless anarchy, conformity versus individuality, how everyone has the ability to call out bullshit in society, and ultimately the way you're seen by the public not being important as long as you remain true to yourself. There's a lot it leaves you to think about, and while it isn't as overtly dark as, say, Persona 3, the more mature nature of 5's story comes from underlying details, often involving some really fucked up backstories for a lot of the main cast. On that note, I love just about every one of 5's cast. Some more than others, Haru for life, but all the characters are quirky, well-developed, and believable as a group of friends. Even the side characters that you get to know through confidants I love. As much as I enjoy 3 and 4 in terms of gameplay, 5 takes all the elements from the 2 and refines them enough to make the overall game just play better. Instead of procedurally generated dungeons, the palaces in 5 are all handcrafted, and in my opinion, this makes way for a lot more creativity in level themes and puzzles. A lot of small additions and improvements are made to combat, which helps a lot in cutting down a good deal of what could potentially make 3 and 4's combat tedious, along with making enemy and boss encounters feel a lot more like a team effort than ever before. Throughout all the near 100 hours I put into Persona 5, the game's universe sucked me in and made that large amount of time feel even longer. In a good way, mind you. Spending all that time in Shibuya, learning more and more about the characters and the world around me was a lovely experience, and the game coming to an end legit made me sad to go. I suppose there's a few issues I could bring up, but in the end, they do nothing to make the game any less my favorite of 2017, along with my new favorite game, period. So yeah, it's pretty alright I guess. I'd rate it a 9 out of 5. Go buy 20 copies right now. The end.